Welcome, Horror Files. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Eleanor.
And this is episode 0 for our podcast, Horror Sandbox.
We are so glad you're here. Maybe you've been listening for a while and you wanted to kind of peek back and learn a little bit more of our background. Or maybe you've been haunting the various spooky hallways of podcast catchers and you saw this new one and thought you'd check us out.
Yeah, either way, we're super excited. We wanted to record this episode to give you a brief introduction of who we are, why we're doing this, and what we want this show to be about. So let's get started.
Let's. Okay, Charlie, what even is Horror Sandbox?
Okay, Horror Sandbox is a show where two horror fans, us, talk about horror movies. We talk about how we relate to the art form, some of the darker aspects of our humanity and general experiences. And we also talk about things like mental health, culture, symbolism throughout the movies, and what it is about these stories that keep bringing us back for more. Now, Eleanor, I'm sure listeners want to know, why did we decide to call it Horror Sandbox?
Well, other than the delightful childhood playground equipment you are all familiar with, a sandbox is a way to describe an isolated environment where someone can play around in such a way that no matter what they're doing, they're not impacting other environments or being impacted by those other environments. For example, if you are a software developer, you might have a virtual sandbox where you play around with a tool or application in such a way that it's isolated from the rest of your system, so you can kind of figure out the bugs before you launch it and, destroy your world. Charlie and I have both, had mental health challenges around anxiety and trauma. And sometimes when I tell people that part of my life, and they also know that I really, really love horror, they are a little bit baffled. And I've been using the analogy that this is a sandbox. This is a safe place to explore and engage with these feelings and emotions, and sometimes the physiological responses, without actually being in any danger. So that's the concept.
Yes, so welcome to our comfy, cozy little sandbox of horror. But in addition to talking about how we find horror comforting and some of the darker sides of horror, we've decided that horror movies potentially fall into 3 general categories. They, to us, either tend to be scary, sad, or funny, or some warped combination of the 3. We spend the majority of our podcast reviewing the movie, exploring its themes, providing general banter around it. But then at the end of each episode, we debate if we think the movie is actually scary or if it's just a sad story. For example, like some kind of review of coping strategies of some horrific tragedy or a general mental health crisis. Or we talk about if it's funny. So funny could be either the movie is just terribly filmed and because of that it's funny, or the director was a master in combining horror and comedy into the movie, which is some of my favorites.
So many examples.
So many, especially recently. And it's not a hard or fast rule that horror movies fall into these 3 categories. We also explore unique categories as they come up, but those are the general buckets we plot them into.
Exactly. So what can the listeners expect from the show?
So they can expect, like we mentioned, 2 horror movie lovers talking about horror movies. You can also anticipate the level of seriousness or lack thereof you'd expect from a couple of millennial women who are military vets. But we also have no formal education in film history or, review. So this is just us having a good time and exploring our love of horror movies. But what is something that listeners should not expect from this podcast?
I'd say we're not going to do too many pure slasher flicks. Neither of us are super into that. We really don't like what we like to call the genre that is just torture porn. Classic example is like Hostel. We'll definitely get into dark themes, so don't worry. But we don't expect us to do too much of the, gore for gore's sake kind of a film.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's not much plot there to discuss anyway. But also, speaking of gore for gore's sake, we will have general spoilers and trigger warnings as part of the disclaimer at the beginning of our show. But we won't go into individual spoiler or trigger warnings for each movie generally. I would say just be prepared, if you don't already know this, for us to spoil the entire movie for you. And then as far as triggers, I mean, it's horror movies, so it's pretty much got all of them. However, we might break that rule when it comes to anything involving kids. We don't do well with when kids get, injured or whatever in movies. We might warn people when that topic comes up or anything else we find really disturbing.
Yeah. What about the structure of the show? Should we kind of get into that a little bit?
Yeah. Okay. So we start every episode with a little lighthearted chat about how we're coping with the horrors of life. It could be a book we're reading, a podcast we're listening to, a funny thing our kids said, something fun we did over the weekend, anything like that. Then we give a quick 1 or 2 sentence overview of the movie that we're going to be reviewing. We also nominate each movie for a little Horror Sandbox exclusive award before going into more detail. We'll talk about our reactions to the movie, anything that connected with us in a powerful way, anything we didn't like I mentioned before, general themes, vibes, just talk about it. And then at the end, we will say what we think the movie is actually about and if at its core it's a horror story or something else. So... yeah. Eleanor, did you want to tell the listeners more about who we are, the fun part?
Yeah, I think we already established we are both millennials. We are both moms. We're Air Force veterans, but we've both been out for a couple years now. We met many years ago while we were both still active duty, and we instantly were friends and discovered pretty quickly that we were both kind of into the spookier side of things. Anything creepy or weird, that was us. You might hear us reference our time in various places across the country throughout this podcast because we have lived kind of all over the place. But right now we both live on the East Coast. What else?
We both share a love of our cats. We love cats very much.
Oh, yes, we do. We can't leave out the Lucifers.
Yes, we can't. As you all will pick up if you haven't already, Eleanor is our punny one.
I try.
But gosh, other things people should know about us. We love tarot and other witchy things in general. We're into mythology. Halloween is without a doubt our favorite holiday. We like art history. And then like any good millennial, we love our granny hobbies. I'm very into cross stitch. Eleanor's more the sewy, crafty type and thrifty type as well. But these are just general things you could expect us to bring up during the episodes as we relate to these movies and talk about ourselves a little bit too.
Absolutely. Okay, I think we did it, Charlie.
Woo!
I think that's episode 0. So would you like to tell the listeners how they can reach us?
Yes. So you can find us on our website, www.horrorsandbox.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at horror.sandbox. And you can email us at horror.sandbox@gmail.com. Feel free to send us any fun stories or any movie recommendations you might want to see from us.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening, and may the horrors persist.